The Family Man. So, tell us about the new book, Chip. The studio lights were warm on his face, the kind of warmth that made you feel important, chosen, the center of everything. Chip Dalton leaned back in his chair, the guest's chair, the one angled just right so the camera caught his best side, and smiled the smile that had sold 14 million copies. Well, Karen, this one's personal. He let the word hang there, weighted with significance. I've written thrillers, mysteries, even that one experimental literary thing the critics loved and nobody bought. A self-deprecating chuckle. The audience laughed on cue. But this book, The Family Man, is about what really matters. Being a husband, being a father, being present for the people who need you most. That sounds wonderful. It's the story I was born to write. He looked directly into the camera, the way his media coach had taught him. Eye contact with America. In this world of distractions, of phone calls and emails and endless noise, we forget what's important. Family, love, being there, not just physically, but emotionally. That's what this book is about. Your wife must be thrilled. Jessica is my rock, and my daughter Allison, she's 16 now, can you believe it? She's the reason I do everything I do. Every word I write for them. The audience applauded, Karen beamed, and Chip Dalton smiled his 14 million copy smile, while something cold and empty sat in his chest where a heart should have been. That was shit. The green room door had barely closed before the smile dropped. Chip grabbed a bottle of water from the craft services table and drained half of it, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Kathleen Savage sat in the corner, laptop open, schedule pulled up, already calculating the next obligation. She'd been his editor for 18 years. She'd been other things too, once, before she'd learned what she was worth to him. The ratings will be good, she said. The Today Show numbers always— I said it was shit. Did you hear me stumble on the being present line? That's going to be a meme by tomorrow. Chip Dalton forgets how to be present. Christ. No one noticed. I noticed. He threw the empty bottle toward the trash, missed, didn't pick it up. Why wasn't there a teleprompter? I specifically asked for a teleprompter. They don't use them for the interview segments, I told you that. Then you should have told them to make an exception. That's your job, Kathleen, managing these things, making my life easier. He was putting on his jacket now, checking his reflection in the mirror. Still handsome at 52. Still the face on the book jackets. What's next? Car to the airport, flight to Albany at 2. You'll be at the cabin by dinner. Good. I need to actually write this goddamn book at some point. His phone rang. He glanced at the screen, sighed. What is it, Jess? Kathleen watched him in the mirror, the way his face changed when he talked to his wife, the warmth draining out, replaced by something flat and irritated, like a man being asked to perform a task beneath him. No, I don't know when I'll be back. That's not how writing works. Because it takes as long as it takes, Jessica. I don't care what the school said. She can miss one parent-teacher conference. Then you go. That's what you're for. He hung up without saying goodbye. She wants me at some school thing. He was adjusting his collar now, not looking at Kathleen, like I have time to sit in a gymnasium and pretend to care about Allison's grades. Allison called the office yesterday. About what? She wants to know if you'd approved the France trip, the school exchange program. She needs an answer by Friday or she loses her spot. How much? 4,000. Jesus Christ. He laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. 4 grand, so she can drink wine and pretend to learn French. Fine, whatever. Tell her yes. Whatever keeps the little bitch happy. Kathleen's fingers paused on her keyboard just for a moment, just long enough. I'll let her know. You do that. He grabbed his bag, checked his phone again, smiled at someone on the screen. A text from someone who wasn't his wife. Car's here. Don't forget to send me the revised outline. And Kathleen, yes, that thing with the teleprompter, don't let it happen again." He walked out without waiting for a response. Kathleen sat in the empty green room, staring at the door, and allowed herself 10 seconds of hatred before she opened her laptop and got back to work. The cabin was beautiful. That was the word everyone used. Beautiful. 3,000 square feet of hand-hewn timber and floor-to-ceiling windows perched on 50 private acres in the Catskills. A writer's retreat, the real estate listing had said. A place to create. Chip had bought it 12 years ago, back when the third book hit the list and the money started meaning something. He'd told Jessica it was an investment, told the accountant it was a tax write-off, told himself it was necessary for the work, for the solitude, for the creative processes that required absolute isolation. None of that was true. The cabin was where he went to be himself, the real self, the one that smiled on television and signed books for adoring fans and said all the right things about family and love and being present. The one that needed release. The one that brought women here, fans usually. The ones who waited after readings with something hungry in their eyes and did things Jessica didn't need to know about. The nearest neighbors were a mile away. They knew who he was, what he was worth, and they knew enough to leave him alone. No one came to the cabin unless Chip Dalton wanted them there. He unpacked his laptop, set it on the desk by the window, the one with the view of the mountains that he'd probably photographed for 3 different magazine profiles, poured himself a whiskey from the bottle he kept under the drawer. The Family Man. The cursor blinked on the empty page. He'd been talking about this book for 2 years, promising it to his publisher, teasing it in interviews, building anticipation for a story he hadn't written a single word of, because the truth was, Chip Dalton didn't know how to write about family, about love, about being present. He knew how to write about murder, about betrayal, about the darkness in people's hearts. That came easy. This was work. He took a sip of whiskey, cracked his knuckles, started to type. Chapter 1. Richard Mercer was a good man. He paused, looked at the screen. The words staring back at him weren't the words he'd typed. Richard Mercer was a liar. Chip blinked, deleted the line, typed again. Richard Mercer was a devoted husband and father. The screen flickered. The words rearranged themselves. Richard Mercer was a monster who wore a good man's face. What the hell? He checked the keyboard, checked the connection, closed the document, and opened a new one. Typed a test line. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. The words appeared correctly. Normal. Fine. He opened The Family Man again, typed, Richard loved his wife more than anything in the world. The screen shimmered. The sentence changed. Richard loved nothing but himself. His wife was a convenience. His daughter was an accident he'd never forgiven her for. Chip slammed the laptop shut. His hands were shaking. Too much whiskey, maybe, or not enough. He poured another glass, drained it, stared at the closed computer like it might bite him. A glitch. Had to be. Some kind of virus, maybe, or a prank. Kathleen knew his passwords. Maybe she'd finally snapped. Finally decided to get back at him for... No, that was paranoid. That was crazy. He opened the laptop again. The document was waiting, and there was new text on the screen. Text he hadn't written. Open your eyes, Chip. It's time to tell the truth. He tried everything. Restarted the computer, reinstalled the software, created a new document, a new file, a new folder. It didn't matter. Every time he tried to write The Family Man, the words twisted. Every lie he typed became truth on the screen. Every piece of fiction became confession. Richard told his wife he was working late, became. Chip told Jessica he was working late. He was in room 412 of the Marriott with a 23-year-old named Brittany who thought he might mention her in his acknowledgments. Richard cherished his daughter's accomplishments, became. Chip couldn't remember the last time he'd asked Allison about school. He couldn't remember her teachers' names, friends' names, anything about her life that didn't directly inconvenience him. Richard was faithful. Chip had slept with 14 women since his wedding day. Fans, assistants, a journalist who'd promised a favorable review. Kathleen, back when she was young enough to believe his promises. He'd remembered the way she'd looked at him when she realized he was never going to leave Jessica, the hope dying in her eyes. He'd enjoyed it. He stopped typing. The words kept coming. You enjoyed all of it, didn't you? The power, the control, the way you could make people want you and then throw them away. You've spent your whole life taking, Chip. Taking love you didn't earn. Taking credit you didn't deserve. Taking and taking and taking until the people around you starved. Now it's your turn to starve. Chip tried to close the laptop. His hands wouldn't move. He tried to stand up. His legs wouldn't respond. He sat there, frozen, watching words appear on the screen that he wasn't typing, that no one was typing, that seemed to be coming from somewhere inside him and somewhere far beyond him at the same time. You're going to write your book now, Chip, the real one, the one about who you really are, and you're not going to stop until it's finished. The first day wasn't so bad. His body moved without permission, his fingers flying across the keyboard, but the words flowing onto the screen were just words. Confessions, yes, ugly truths, but he'd made peace with those a long time ago. He knew who he was. He just never had to say it out loud. The book wrote itself through him, chapter after chapter, page after page. His childhood, the lies he'd told to seem more interesting. His first marriage, the one no one knew about, the one he'd annulled when someone better came along. The way he'd built his career, on the back of a ghostwriter he'd blackmailed into silence. The women, the money, the 1,000 small cruelties he'd inflicted on anyone who couldn't fight back. He wrote through dinner, didn't notice the hunger. He wrote through midnight, didn't notice the exhaustion. By morning, he'd written 40,000 words, and his body was screaming for food, for water, for rest. But his fingers kept moving, and the words kept coming, and he couldn't stop, couldn't even slow down. Please, he thought, please, I need to eat. The words on the screen answered. You let them starve for years. Your wife, hungry for affection. Your daughter, hungry for attention. Kathleen, hungry for the respect you promised and never delivered. Now you know how it feels. Keep writing. By the third day, he could barely see the screen. His vision was blurring, his hands were cramping. He'd wet himself twice because his body wouldn't let him get up to use the bathroom. The smell of his own urine mixed with the smell of his own sweat, and he typed through all of it, typed until his fingers bled on the keys. The book was changing now. It wasn't just confession anymore. It was something else, something deeper, something that felt like it was being pulled from a part of him he hadn't known existed. It was about suffering, and what it meant to hurt someone, to really hurt them, not with fists, but with indifference, with cruelty so casual it barely registered as cruelty at all. The book was about the weight of small wounds, accumulated over years, until the person carrying them couldn't stand up anymore. It was about his wife Jessica, who had been valedictorian of her class, who had wanted to be a lawyer, who had given up everything to raise his daughter while he built his empire, who had watched him bring other women into their bed, metaphorically and once literally, when he'd gotten sloppy, and stayed anyway, because he'd made sure she had nothing to go back to. No career, no savings of her own, no friends he hadn't slowly, systematically isolated her from. It was about his daughter Allison, who had learned at the age of 8 that her father's attention was conditional, transactional, something to be earned and never guaranteed, who had stopped trying by 10, who looked at him now with eyes that expected nothing because nothing was exactly what he'd given her. It was about Kathleen, who had believed him when he'd said he loved her, who had spent 3 years waiting for him to leave Jessica, even after Allison was born, who had finally understood that she was just another thing he'd consumed and discarded, who had spent 18 years watching him take credit for her ideas, her edits, her careful restructuring of his sloppy prose into something publishable, who hated him and couldn't leave because her entire career was built on his name. The book was about every person he'd ever touched, every life he'd diminished, every light he'd dimmed, because it made him feel bigger to stand in someone else's shadow. And it was beautiful. He could see that, even through the pain, even through the hunger that was starting to eat him from the inside. The words flowing through him weren't his words. They were better than anything he'd ever written, truer, more alive. This was the book he'd always been capable of, if he'd ever been brave enough to look at himself clearly. He wasn't brave. He'd never been brave, but he was writing it anyway. On the 5th day, the phone rang. His hand moved without his permission, picked up the receiver, pressed it to his ear. "Chip," Jessica's voice, tired and weary. "You've been gone almost a week. You haven't called." His mouth opened. Words came out he didn't choose. "I need to tell you something, Jess." A pause. "What?" "I've been unfaithful to you, not once, not a few times, constantly, for our entire marriage. I've slept with more women than I can count, fans, colleagues, the woman from the dry cleaners. I've never loved any of them. I've never loved anyone. I'm not sure I'm capable of it." Silence on the other end of the line. "I know you know," he continued, his voice flat, mechanical, a recording of himself. "I know you've known for years. I know you stayed because I made sure you had no other choice. I took your career, your friends, your self-respect. I wanted you dependent on me because that was the only way I knew how to keep someone." "Chip." "I'm sorry, Jessica. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. I just needed you to hear me say it, to hear me admit what I am." He hung up. His hand was shaking, or his whole body was shaking. He couldn't tell anymore. He was so hungry, so tired, so completely, utterly empty. The phone rang again. He answered. "Daddy," Allison's voice, uncertain. She hadn't called him Daddy in years. "Mom said, she said she called you. She's crying. What's going on?" His mouth opened again. "I've been a terrible father, Allison. I know that. I've known it for years, and I've never tried to be better. You deserved so much more than I gave you. You deserved attention and affection and a parent who showed up. Instead, you got me. A man who saw you as an inconvenience, an obligation, a line item on a budget. I called you a bitch just days ago, behind your back, to my editor. I've called you worse when you weren't listening." "Dad, stop." "You're brilliant, Allison. You're kind. You're everything I'm not. And I've spent your whole life trying to diminish that because I couldn't stand seeing goodness I didn't have. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I hope someday you can build a life that has nothing to do with me. I hope someday you can forget I existed." He hung up. The tears were streaming down his face now. He didn't know if they were his or if the thing controlling him had decided he should cry. It didn't matter. The phone was ringing again. Kathleen. "Chip, Jessica just called me. What's happening? Are you having some kind of breakdown?" "I owe you an apology, Kathleen. I've owed you one for 18 years. "Chip, you're scaring me." "I used you. When you were young and you believed in me, I used that belief. I let you think I was going to leave Jessica, let you think we had a future, because it was convenient, because you worked harder when you thought there was something to work toward. When I got bored, I threw you away and made you watch me do the same thing to other women over and over, while you edited my books and fixed my mistakes and never got credit for any of it. Stop! Just stop! You're a better writer than I am. You always have been. Half the sentences people quote from my books are yours. The twist in Dark Harbor, the ending of The Last Light, those were your ideas. I took them, and I never acknowledged it because I needed to believe I was special. I needed to believe I was a genius. You made me look like one for almost 2 decades, and I repaid you with contempt. Chip. I'm sorry, Kathleen. You deserved so much better than me. Everyone did. He hung up. The laptop was waiting. His fingers returned to the keys. Keep writing, the screen said. You're almost done. By day 8, he couldn't feel his body anymore. He was still typing. He could see his fingers moving, see the world appearing on the screen, but the connection between his mind and his flesh had worn thin, like a rope fraying under too much weight. He was so hungry, hungrier than he'd ever been in his life. His stomach had stopped growling days ago. Now there was just a vast, cold emptiness where his organs used to be. He'd lost weight. He could see it in his hands, the way the skin stretched over bone, the way his wedding ring, which he'd never bothered to take off, even during the affairs, hung loose on his finger. He thought about food, dreamed about it in between sentences. A steak, medium rare, with a red wine reduction, the pasta Jessica used to make before he'd criticized it so many times she stopped trying. The pancakes Allison had made him for Father's Day when she was 7, misshapen and burnt, and the best thing he'd ever tasted. He'd told her they were terrible. He remembered that now, remembered the way her face had fallen, the way she'd tried to smile anyway, the way she'd never make him breakfast again. I'm sorry, he thought. I'm so sorry. The words appeared on the screen. Sorry isn't enough. It was never going to be enough. But it's a start. On day 10, he started to hallucinate. Jessica was there, standing by the window, wearing the dress she'd worn on their first date. She was beautiful in a way he'd stopped noticing years ago. Beautiful and sad, and looking at him with something that might have been pity. You could have loved me, she said. I would have let you. All you had to do was try. Allison was there too, younger, maybe 5 or 6, the age when she still reached for his hand, still believed he hung the moon. She was holding a crayon drawing, a family, stick figures, a house with a yellow sun. You're in this one, Daddy, she said. See? I put you right in the middle. Kathleen was there, young again, the way she'd looked when she'd first walked into his office with her manuscript, and her hope and her belief that hard work meant something, before he'd taught her otherwise. I thought you were brilliant, she said. I thought you saw something in me, but you just saw something you could use. They stood around him, these ghosts of women he'd failed, and he wept while his fingers kept typing. The book was almost done. He could feel it ending, the way you can feel a storm passing, the pressure in the air finally releasing. The price of cruelty is paid in the same currency it was spent, the screen said. You starved them of love. Now you starve. There is a justice in the universe. It's not kind. It's not quick. But it's patient. It always collects what it's owed. This is what you owe. On day 12, Chip Dalton wrote the last sentence of The Family Man. His fingers stopped moving. The screen glowed softly in the darkness. He'd written for 12 days straight. No sleep, no food, no rest. And the cursor blinked at the end of a paragraph about forgiveness, not asking for it, not deserving it, just acknowledging that it existed out there somewhere for people who hadn't done what he had done. The book was 127,000 words. It was, without question, the best thing he'd ever written. It was going to make his wife and daughter, and Kathleen, very, very wealthy. He was going to die. He knew that now, had known it for days, maybe from the beginning. His body was shutting down. He could feel it. The systems failing one by one. The machinery of life grinding to a halt because he hadn't eaten in 12 days and hadn't slept in nearly as long, and there was simply nothing left to run on. He tried to stand. His legs buckled. He hit the floor hard, felt something crack, a rib maybe, or the last of his dignity, and lay there, staring at the ceiling, breathing in shallow gasps that didn't seem to bring any air. The laptop screen was still visible from where he lay. New words were appearing. The final message. You spent your life writing fiction. Stories about heroes you could never be. Villains you pretended you weren't. You lied for a living, Chip. You lied until you forgot what truth felt like. This is truth. This is what it costs. This is the only honest thing you've ever done. He thought about Jessica, about the life she might have now, free of him. The career she could resurrect, the friendships she could rebuild, the person she could become without his shadow over her. He thought about Allison, about the therapy she'd probably need, years of it, to undo what he'd done. But she was young, she was strong. She had time to become someone whole. He thought about Kathleen, about the manuscript sitting on his laptop, her name nowhere in it, but her fingerprints all over it nonetheless. She'd edit this one too. She'd make it better, the way she'd made everything better. And this time, maybe, she'd finally get what she deserved. He thought about himself, about the boy he'd been before he'd learned to want things, about the man he could have become if he'd ever once chosen kindness over conquest. It was too late for that now. I'm sorry, he thought, and for the first time in his life, he meant it. The words appeared on the screen one final time. We know. Chip Dalton closed his eyes. They found him 3 days later. A caretaker hired to check on the property once a month noticed the smell before he noticed the car still in the driveway. He called the police. They called the coroner. The coroner called it death by starvation, complicated by dehydration and exhaustion. A tragedy, everyone said. A brilliant writer taken too soon. The laptop was still open on the desk. The manuscript was still on the screen, all 27,000 words of it, saved automatically to the cloud and backed up to 3 different servers. The police read enough to know it was personal, confessional, the kind of thing that would make headlines. They called Jessica. She came to the cabin alone. Allison had wanted to come, not out of grief, but out of curiosity, the morbid need to see where he'd ended. But Jessica had said no. This was something she needed to do herself. The smell was gone by then. The body was gone. The cabin had been cleaned professionally, every trace of what had happened scrubbed away. But she could still feel him there, the ghost of his presence, his cruelty, his absolute certainty that the world owed him everything. She sat at his desk, opened the laptop, read. It took her 2 days to finish. She didn't sleep, didn't eat, just read page after page, the story of her marriage told from the inside of the man who had destroyed it. She cried, screamed, threw the laptop across the room, and retrieved it an hour later because she had to know how it ended. When she finished, she sat in silence for a long time. Then she called Kathleen. He wrote a book. Kathleen's voice was careful. What kind of book? The truth, all of it, everything he did, everything he was. He confessed to. God, Kathleen, everything. Silence on the line. He mentions you, what happened between you before Allison was born, how he used you, how he's been using you ever since. Jessica paused. I'm sorry. I should have said something. I knew, and I never. You have nothing to apologize for. Neither do you. Jessica took a breath. The book is good. It's the best thing he ever wrote. And I think we should publish it. Jessica, hear me out. The advance alone would be substantial. The royalties could set us up for life. Me, Allison, You. His publisher will jump at it. A confessional memoir from Chip Dalton found after his death. It'll be a sensation. People will know everything about all of us. People will know what he did, not what we survived. Jessica's voice was steady now, stronger than it had been in years. Let them see him clearly for once. Let them see what was behind the smile, and let us take everything he would have kept for himself. Kathleen was quiet for a long moment. He would have hated that, she finally said. I know. Another pause, then softly, Send me the manuscript. The Family Man was published 8 months later. It debuted at number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list. The reviews called it searing, unflinching, a masterwork of self-examination. Book clubs dissected it. Graduate students wrote theses about it. A famous director bought the film rights for a sum that made Jessica laugh out loud when she saw the number. In the acknowledgments, written by Kathleen, approved by Jessica, the only addition to Chip's original manuscript, there was a single line. For the women who survived him. Jessica used her share to go back to law school. She graduated at 51, third in her class, and took a job at a nonprofit that helped domestic abuse survivors escape their situations. She was good at it. She understood, in ways she never talked about, what it meant to be trapped by someone who claimed to love you. Allison used hers to travel, a year abroad, then 2, then 3. She sent postcards from places Jessica had never heard of, photos of mountains and oceans and sunsets that looked like they belonged in dreams. She was finding herself, she said, figuring out who she was when she wasn't living in his shadow. She sounded happy. Kathleen used hers to start her own editing house, a small operation, just her and 2 assistants, but selective. She only worked with writers she believed in, writers who had something to say and the courage to say it honestly. She never edited another book by a man who reminded her of Chip Dalton. And sometimes, late at night, when the world was quiet and the weight of the past felt heavy on her shoulders, Jessica would take out her copy of The Family Man and read the last page, the passage about forgiveness. It exists, Chip had written, somewhere out there for people who haven't done what I've done. I'll never know what it feels like. I don't deserve to know, but I believe in it anyway. The possibility of grace, of redemption, of starting over. I believe in it in the way a man dying of thirst believes in water he'll never taste. If you're reading this and you've hurt someone and you're wondering if it's too late to change, it's not. It's never too late. Not until you're where I am. Not until the last word is written. She would close the book, set it on the shelf, go to bed beside no one, in a house that was finally hers, and sleep better than she'd slept in 20 years. And somewhere, in whatever void exists between justice and mercy, Chip Dalton's last honest words hung in the darkness like stars, cold, distant, and finally true.